Nani vai embora, vai fugir Nani, procurou os olhos do adversário, parou, Nani, vê que tem Almeida, vê que tem João Pereira, fugiu João Pereira, vai cruzar, cruzamento, Ronaldo, gol!
Hello and welcome to the latest PortuGOAL podcast. This is the show brought to you by www.portugal.net, England's the English language foremost site on Portuguese football. Today we'll be discussing the performance of Portugal's club sides in Europe and also the title race between FC Porto and Benfica. As well as that, we'll end the show by having a look at Portugal's crucial World Cup qualifiers coming up against Israel and Azerbaijan. Okay, so without further ado, let me introduce today's panel. We'll be doing our best not to be too somber today because on board we have two of FC Porto's most ardent fans, Vitor Ferreira and Simon de Souza. Vitor, you recovered from Wednesday yet?
No, it's still hurting a little bit, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, and Simon, I suppose the same applies to you.
Yeah, it's still stinging. Keep replaying in my mind, that match. It's not going down. It's not going down easily, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, we'll be discussing the Porto Malaga game in depth in just a while. Simon and Vitor are Toronto residents, as is our next panelist, who's also part of the vibrant Portuguese community there in Canada. And as a big Benfica fan, I'm guessing you're in a slightly better mood after this week's events, Orlando.
Well, actually, my mood on Benfica doesn't change that much. I might have something to say about what they've done, but my mood doesn't change that much.
Okay, look forward to hearing that. So, where should we start? I think there's only one place to start, really, and that's FC Porto. They went to Malaga, went to Spain on Wednesday. I think every Porto fan, most football fans in general in Portugal, and I think, to be honest, most analysts throughout Europe were expecting Porto to get past Malaga. Of course, they lost 2-0, hugely disappointing result for them. And we've got a poll currently running on the Portuguese site asking what are the main reasons for Porto's defeat. At the moment, topping the list, we have Stephen Defore's red card, just a few more percentage points than Vitor Pereira's tactics and his selection. So, Vitor, do you agree? Who is most to blame? Who or what is most to blame for this defeat, in your opinion?
Well, Stephen Defore's red card had a huge part in it, but who placed Stephen Defore on the field? Vitor Pereira, and it was not anything close to being a good move. Before the game, he hyped up about how Porto would not be a defensive team, how they'd play like they usually do, full frontal attack, but they didn't do so, and that was obvious right from the get-go with that team selection in placing Defore on the wing instead of Ismailov, who had been having a few good games, or even James, who said himself that he was recovered enough to play 90 minutes, or even Atsu, but no, he picks maybe the worst option out of all of them and places Stephen Defore as a winger, and who never does well in that position, as seen in the Benfica game, I believe. After that, you could kind of see the takeaways from that right from the get-go. Porto were lacking a lot in the final third. All the play that was created was pretty much done through Alexandro coming up from the left, and even rarely from Varela. But Stephen Defore isn't the type of player to connect with Jackson in the final third and make those plays. He doesn't give that creative edge. So Porto were already lacking there, isolating Jackson by himself, which resulted in them barely getting a shot on net. Second half, I guess it's not completely his fault because Moutinho's injury did really kill the team. I would think, but second half again, that one change that he made, Stephen Defour, who was playing the entire game like he had something to prove, and he was going to do it by kicking the head or decapitating someone on the Malaga team with high boots and or even breaking legs. Got that second yellow in what was a really dumb tackle, I think, because I think Alexandro had whoever it was that was on the run covered, but with a really dumb tackle, he really just destroyed Porto's chances. And you could see from the team after that red card, they were just deflated. And personally, watching the game at that point, I already knew it was just, it's over. And I was proven right because Porto did not they rarely got another shot on net. The only two chances that they did have were both offside. And really, this all comes in the end from the tactics from the get-go, like I said. Now, I don't know why Vitor Pereira chose to go with a defensive tactical formation. I don't know what was going through his head, but I think the consensus is that it was definitely the wrong decision to make.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you were saying there that, and I think I agree with you, especially after the second goal, and really, I suppose from about 5 or 10 minutes towards the end of the 5 or 10 minutes from the end of the first half, what really surprised me was, like you said, Porto just seemed really a bit kind of deflated. They just didn't really seem on top of their game, or almost like they thought they didn't need to be on top of their game. Simon, do you think? I think most people, like I said, expected Porto to go through. They were the favourites without a doubt. Do you think perhaps they underestimated a little bit Malaga? They thought it would be a little easier than it ended up being.
I don't think they underestimated per se. They topped their group, obviously, with AC Milan and Zenit, I believe, who were in the group. So at this point in the competition, everyone is extremely skilled. They're all professionals. I don't think there's really any underestimating going on. There were several ingredients to this recipe of disaster that FC Porto had on Wednesday. As Vitor said, most of them were in the control of Vitor Pereira. Some of them were out of his control. Like, it's the depth in midfield, like injuries to Moutinho, James Rodriguez. Like, you can't blame him. They're two of the team's best players. But playing Stephen Defour on the wing to start, as Vitor said, is probably the worst of the four other options of James, Ismailov, and Atsu to start. He says, we're going to attack from the start, but let's be real. Home field advantage is so important in Champions League. When you're on your home field, you're going to be attacking, and when you're visiting someone else's field, especially in a match like this, you're going to have to be defending. Even if you say you want to attack, you're going to be forced into defending. So I think we all know that he was okay. We're going to have to defend a little bit more. Let's put Stephen Defour on. He can cover back a little bit. Well, it's a risk he took, and he got burned. He did not play that well. He doesn't link up well with the other two forwards in the final third. And, the red card, what can you say? It was fully deserved. It was a stupid red card. Another issue which kind of got overlooked, playing the blame game still, is just the out of form and sloppy play of Danilo at right back. It's like we're playing with 10 men already down there. Otamendi or Maicon, once he came on, it's like you got to cover two positions now. He's really fallen from form. I wouldn't say it's directly the fault of Vitor Pereira, like what can you do, the guy's out of form, but I think it's the fault that he sent Miguel Lopes off in January to Sporting. Now, when you look at the roster, who's the other right back? No one. Maicon's not a right back. He patched in last year for a little bit, and he was terrible himself. So there's no one pressing Danilo for his job. There's no one in training that's on him, pressing him, making him go harder. So he knows his job is safe, and the guy's just slid way out of form. It's unbelievable, and he was the root cause of the second goal. He wasn't aware of his surroundings. I think Malaga had a corner kick, and it was headed out, and Danilo didn't know who's behind him and if he had time or not. So he played it safe and he knocked the ball out, and which caused another corner kick for Malaga, and that was scored on. And I think I tweeted that right away. I said the root of that goal was Danilo not knowing his surroundings, not knowing that there was no one behind him to latch onto that ball. So he could have let the ball run out for a goal kick for Helton. He didn't know who was around him. And he stayed safe, and he knocked it out just to be careful. And most of the times staying safe works, but that time it burned us because he wasn't aware who's around him, and he just has not been playing very good.
Yeah. Okay. Simon, I just want to say that's a very interesting point you bring up about the fact that Miguel Lopez was let go when the times he did play for Porto. He seems to do quite a good job, and of course they also had the chance to bring Jorge Fucili back into the fold, and they decided that he wasn't going to be part of the setup. So as well as that, you've also got the fact that their winter acquisitions, Ismailov hasn't been bad, I suppose, but hasn't really set the world alight, and Lee Edson doesn't seem to have hardly got a kick and seems to be out of form. Don't think he'll be making much of a contribution by the looks of it. Vitor, going back to you, do you think then perhaps the blame for, again, if we look at the blame for, we all said that Porto were a little bit thin on the ground, didn't have much depth. Do you think that some of the blame for this has to go to, the backroom staff and maybe even Pinto da Costa for not providing the resources?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, who's the one who tells Pinto da Costa whether he wants extra men in a certain position? That would be, again, Vitor Pereira. And bringing up the Fucile point, it was interesting. Since last year's Champions League tie against Zenit, when I think it was Fucile who got the red card, or just had a terrible game, and then he got a red card, and that's what killed Porto in that game. Since that game, he was completely, I believe, dropped from the team. He was just that's it. That was the final goal for him, and I think that's again due to Vitor Pereira's options. He after that, Fucile just never got a second chance, and I guess he thought that he was fine with Danilo, who, from what we heard before he came to Portugal, and from even what we saw before he was injured against Manchester City last year, he looked like he could be a pretty fine player. I don't know how to explain it, but he was different than he was now. Looked a little more confident, had a lot more runs going forward, just seemed to be special. He had the feeling of a crack almost. Now it's just not the same, and I guess that does come down to what Simon said about the lack of opposition. He has no one behind him who can fill in. You either had to, if Danilo went down to injury, you'd either have to put Maicon or, I guess, Otamendi down at right. I mean, who else do you have? No one. And Vitor Pereira is obviously not going to take Danilo out, form or no form, to put a center back at right back. So this guy's good. He's solid. He has no one to contend to. And again, that doesn't come down to the head office or to PDC, because I don't think he makes those choices. I think he goes by what the coach tells him to go by. And if the coach says, "Don't worry about finding a right back, it's covered," I think we have enough options. Then he's not going to go find a right back. And Porto needed a few more forwards. They got Liedson, they got Ismailov. That was covered. Again, both Liedson at least hasn't played too much, but that's a coach's decision. And Porto needed was it Quinones that they brought in during the winter, or no? I think they might have. Yeah, they needed a left back, and Quinones was signed, but for some reason a right back was not signed, and that's down to the coach again.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, both of you hearing your opinion on Danilo there, because of course Porto's two fullbacks, both Brazilian internationals, but really there's no doubt about the difference between the two. Alexandre has been absolutely outstanding this season, probably the best left back in Portugal, and Danilo, like you say, has been really very disappointing. Okay, just to finish this section on Porto, Simon, put yourself in Pinto da Costa's shoes. Okay, not an easy thing to do, I know.
I'm rich now.
Does VP stay on as coach beyond this season? And if not, who should be his replacement?
Well, if I'm in his shoes, no, I think he's ran out his time here. This tie against Malaga here was kind of the final straw. Who I would bring in, we'll stay within Portugal. There are some options. Pedro Manuel, he came through playing for Porto for 5-6 years, probably even more. So he knows the team, he knows the system, he knows all the directives here. I think he was AVB's assistant as well in that year that we had. I even asked it on Twitter, and a lot of people are saying, Domingos. I like Paulo Fonseca, and Marco Silva has been doing a really good job from Estoril as well. There's a lot of options around Portugal. Who I would select, I can't really narrow anyone down. Would I find somebody new? Probably. Will Pinto da Costa actually find somebody new? I don't think so. I think Vitor Pereira is back for another season, especially if we win the championship. So I expect him setting the lineups for another year still.
Okay. Be interesting to see if that pans out exactly like that. So time to move on now. Let's lighten the mood a little bit. Benfica. Orlando. Benfica, they just strolled into the quarterfinals of the Europa League without any problem at all, beating Bordeaux home and away. They're top of the Liga, 2 points clear. If you take out the Braga game, which they lost on penalties, I don't know how long their run is since they last lost a match, months and months. Is it time to review your appraisal of Jorge Jesus?
Well, to be honest with you, Tom, before we get on to Benfica, I'm a very big Portuguese fan. Porto's loss the other day really hurt me because I expected them to do great things. And I thought with a good draw all the way along, I thought that both Benfica and Porto could go a long way in both competitions. And for me, that is most important in Portugal. And I disagree with the other gentleman. I think Pinto da Costa, I have a lot of praise for him for the work that he's done for so many years. But to be honest with you, that depth, he's spending more money on players from other countries. And the difference between him and Luis Felipe Vieira and why we have a ton of depth, actually we don't even use all our depth, is because he's bought Portuguese players that have talent but are cheaper. He's also included in the squad other players that back up, the high buys that we've made, right? I think we're both on the same footing when it comes to, money. So I think Pinto da Costa, the whole depth issue with Porto, we talked about this earlier on. I think it is a main problem. I think it's going to end up costing Porto everything because, when those star players aren't on, I don't blame Vitor Pereira that much because he only has a certain amount to work with, right? Geez, we have Malgrego, who's useless at left back, but we have Luizinho, a cheap buy, who every time he's in, it's 3+ goals and usually a clean sheet. And he's not the best player. No one here is saying he's the best player in the world. These are just average players, and you need a good set of average players, good set of Portuguese crop that you can bring in, and you also need those star players that you get from anywhere else. And that's, for me, it really hurt me, Porto's loss, because I think they could, with that squad, that starting 11 that they have, and the formation, I think they could have gotten so much deeper. As for JJ, and my evaluation on JJ, I think I've been pretty fair with him, hard but fair. I've always been a manager. I've always managed businesses, managed, the sort of crop that you have, the employees that you have, and how best can you suit them. So, I'm really hard on managers, I think of all the sports teams I follow, I'm usually very hard on managers. But when they do well, I'm their first proponent. And with JJ this season, to be honest with you, I think JJ is a closet Portugal viewer. I think he comes onto our site and practices English because everything that I've discussed and that others, including Porto fans, have discussed were issues with Benfica in the past. He's corrected all of those this year. His lack of changing formations, his player selection. Let me see. Rotating players, like he lost last season because he didn't rotate any of his star players. I think he's changed all those. I still have some issues with him, but very few. Even the other day, my only issue with JJ is right now he goes with the 4-3-3 in Europe. He gives too much credit to all these teams that we're playing. Way too much credit. I think against Celtic, Spartak, Leverkusen, Bordeaux, Newcastle, we should run a 4-4-2 because that is our strength. We have players that kill that formation, and we should run it at them and outscore them. Sure, we'll get less clean sheets, but I guarantee you we'll win every game and we'll put up 3 or 4 goals every time.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, Orlando, because that was actually linked to my next question for you, which is, of course, this season has been quite similar for Benfica to last season. The only thing was that Benfica kind of fell apart from, I think it was about mid-February onwards. This season, that hasn't happened. And perhaps one reason that hasn't happened is because they do seem to have a very solid defence this season. Very good defence. Conceded very few goals. They've actually only conceded 6 goals in their last 15 games. It's tremendous, really a tremendous record. And of course, because of that, they've been able to, even when they're not firing on all cylinders, they've been able to pick up the wins. 1-0, 2-1, or quite often just 1 goal is all they need to win the game. So, in your opinion, do you think it's been a key difference between last season and this season, just having a stronger defence? In your opinion, what is the key difference between last season and this season?
Well, I think JJ still runs the 4-4-2, and he utilizes both wing backs to attack. So it really creates off balances, not only for the opponent but for us as a club. Last year, I think to a certain extent, Garay, who's a great defender, didn't look that great. And the reason he didn't was because he sort of trusted Emerson to play defense. And for me, Emerson's a better defender than Malgaregu. The difference is this year, Garay doesn't trust him, right? So he's always over on that side. He's always covering. Matic slides in. It's like a good understanding between defenders. Garay slides over a cover for Malgaregu. Matic slides back. Gomes comes near to the middle, and you have Jardel or Luizão, all sliding across and working as a team, as a defensive unit, and that's what's really made the difference from last year. We didn't have that at all last year. We still have, if anything, we have a better attacking option than last year.
Yeah, you got Lima, of course.
Of course, but and I wasn't the biggest fan of getting Lima because I thought Nelson Oliveira as a third striker could be worked in, but he surprised me. He worked very good with the squad, and he works really hard. So it was one of the best buys by LFE. But for me, the way Benfica plays in that 4-4-2, the difference, Javi Garcia wasn't the greatest defensive midfielder. He had certain qualities, and he played really hard. But Matic and his ability to cover so much area, not only offensive and playmaking, but working with Gomes, who to me is another master. It's like we don't need a number 10 when we have those two guys in the middle. They sort of position themselves where they need to be defensively and offensively, and use those weapons, those 6 weapons. Like I said earlier on in the season, at times Benfica was playing a 2-2-6, with everybody attacking. But the difference is that they have players that can control areas, keep the game to where they want it, and then use those attacking options. Even though some of them, aren't the greatest. Like for me, Malgregu hasn't scored any goals, hasn't done anything. He runs up, but for me, he commits Ola to play more defensively than we should. But anyways, when it comes down to it, Benfica this year is playing a different system. JJ is much more responsive. He's using the whole squad to rotate. He's playing Portuguese players. I have to give full hat off to him. And if anything, I think JJ should be the next Portuguese team manager.
Wow, that would be something. Yeah, all-out attack. Seeing Portugal with all these fantastic attacking players they've had over the years, they've never really been an all-out attacking side. So perhaps that will be something which will happen in the future. Vitor, just to finish up on Benfica in Europe then. Of course, we now know their next opponents. They've been drawn against Newcastle United from the EPL. In your opinion, was that a good draw for Benfica?
Yeah, definitely. It's it's a pretty good draw. I mean, there are some weak teams in that draw, and Newcastle is definitely one of them. Benfica, to me, is probably the third best team in the quarterfinals, behind Tottenham and Chelsea. I really think if the only way that they wouldn't get by is if they had drawn either one of those two, but all the other teams are perfectly in Benfica's grasp to get by. Newcastle, I looked at the Premier League standings, and I believe they're in 12th or 13th, and that's not great. So a team like Benfica, who is in great form and is winning every game, it should be easy pickings. Portuguese teams usually don't have too much luck with English opposition, but I think this time will be different. Yeah, I mean, I think all of us wanted to see a little bit to see Tottenham pair up with Benfica, but I'm keeping my ambition and saving that for the dream final, AVB versus JJ round 2.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that will certainly be a fantastic tie if it comes to pass. Like you said, maybe in the final or in the semi, they will meet each other. Okay, well, this show is going to be dominated by Porto and Benfica, just like Porto and Benfica have really dominated the season in Portugal, miles ahead of everyone else, and it's still an absorbing title race. Although, like I said earlier, Benfica have got that slight advantage now, 2-point advantage. On the other hand, the next match between the two, of course, is at the Estádio do Dragão, so Porto got slight advantage in that respect. Now, one thing maybe, which could also be slightly in Benfica's advantage, is that they do seem to have a little bit more momentum now, especially after Porto got knocked out of the Champions League a bit unexpectedly, and of course, you've got to think that has to affect them psychologically. Benfica, on the other hand, they've just been winning game after game. Haven't been playing brilliantly all the time, but they've been picking up the wins, and you can't really, do any more than that. It was interesting listening to Jorge Jesus the other day when he was talking about tiredness with so many games. Benfica still in the Europa League, in the league, in the Portuguese Cup. And he just said, when you're winning games, that's not an issue. When you're winning games, psychologically, it's much easier. You just don't feel the tiredness. And so it appears possibly Benfica have a little bit more momentum than Porto. Simon, would you agree with that? And in your opinion, who would you say are the favourites to pick up the title at this point in time?
Oh, well, asking any Portista, it's difficult to get a straight answer. As you said, Benfica, they definitely have momentum going on their side. Even when they're not playing great, they usually knocking up the three points, and in the end, the 3 points is what matters. Porto got the really emotionally draining loss, the morale draining loss. So momentum's going backwards, but on their side, they're not going to have as many games now. They will have to be traveling across Europe midweek, so they, could use the rest as an advantage. But I think the big advantage here, it will come down to the penultimate round, and it is at the Dragão. So let's hope the home fans can boost them to another title this season.
Okay. One point that I suppose we have to take into account in this title race, this fascinating title race, just 8 games left now. Of course, both sides still unbeaten in the league. Orlando, Jorge Jesus, like I just mentioned, said when you're winning, it doesn't matter. But when asked about the question of tiredness, but if Benfica go on to make the final, for example, of the Europa League, that would be an extra 5 matches, an extra 5 draining, hard matches, very intense matches with a lot at stake. Porto, of course, they're out of the Champions League, so no more European play for them. They're also out of the Portuguese Cup, although they do have Taça da Liga to play for. But Benfica have got a tougher schedule, no doubt about it, in terms of number of games from now until the end of the season. Would that work in Porto's advantage?
To be honest with you, I think with Benfica's depth, and in past years, I might have questioned. We had Matic on the bench last year. We've always had good players on the bench. This year, JJ is actually using. So those extra 5 games, even players like Gaetan that he favored in the past, he's not even playing them every game. So as long as he maintains that, and I think he will, he's going to rotate well. Some injuries are going to come back to help us. And as long as we stay, relatively free of being injured for a long period of time, I think it's no problem. I think we can both handle the schedule of the Liga. Our games aren't that hard. I think we have 2 difficult games to come. I don't really view this game against Guimarães on the weekend as a difficult game. We have Sporting, which is going to be a difficult game. And we also have Porto, which definitely at the Dragão is going to be, it's going to be a wonderful match. It's those matches that we all dream about. So going that way, I don't think we're going to be bothered at all, as long as there's no major injuries.
Okay, yeah. Okay, Vitor, staying on this subject, nightmare scenario for you. Benfica go on to win the title, and Porto are left trophyless. Taking into account that Benfica do seem to be getting to Porto's level on a bit more of a consistent basis these last 4 years since Jorge Jesus took over. Probably only the ABB season is when Porto just completely dominated. In all other seasons, even last season, until the last couple of months or last 6 weeks about, Benfica and Porto were pretty much level pegging. If Benfica go on to win the title this season, do you think this signifies the end of Porto's complete domination of Portuguese football? Of course, they've won 8 of the last 10 titles. Do you think it's going to be pretty much like this for the next few years? Porto and Benfica, pretty well matched?
I wouldn't say so. Well, I don't know if Porto are going to dominate to the same extreme level, but it seems that every time Benfica wins the league title, upper management, Pinto da Costa in particular, I'm sure, do not seem to take it very well. And they make it their absolute mission to ensure that that does not happen the next season. Case in point, we'd be looking at the last time Benfica won the title when Gesualdo was still coaching Porto. Next season, they came out guns a-blazing with Vilas Boas, and they just slaughtered the opposition. They signed a few key players. Moutinho was one. They ensured that front management ensured that they spent the cash necessary to revamp the team to the level back to where it should be, and got a new coach, and everything went well. I think if that happens again this season, we'll see the same. If Porto go trophyless, I think that's the only way that Vitor Pereira does not return. And Porto could bring in any among the few of Fonseca or Domingos or Leonardo Jardim would be fascinating to watch at Porto. And I think any of those would give the side enough to revamp it back to another few years, or at least 1 year of domination. So Benfica have been more consistent the last or this year and the year prior, really neck and neck with Porto. But I still do think that when it comes down to it, Porto still have the slight edge, and that's enough to keep them winning trophies over Benfica.
Okay, yeah. Well, we're going to close our little section on club football there and move on to the Seleção. I just asked gentlemen for some brief responses to these next few questions because we're running a bit short of time. Just to start about this section then, I'm going to read out a few posts. Thank you very much for all your feedback. We always like to hear your comments on the site, which of course is www.portugal.net. And as usual, Paulo Bento's selection of the Portugal squad for these upcoming games has caused a lot of debate, to put it mildly. So I'm going to read out a few of these posts. Okay. Let me just get the right page. Here we go. Andre from the UK says, I won't waste too much time criticising Bento and his selections. It's like flogging a dead horse. So not much doubt what he thinks. D, also from the UK, said, I still think Hugo Viana should have a call-up. He still manages to dictate play in most games and has goals in him. Of course, he scored a couple of goals yesterday as Braga won again. Also, Bruno Gama has impressed for Deportivo, even though they are bottom of La Liga. Nelson Costa from Canada, he says, listen up, George, buddy. There's no need for Brazilian players in this national team. We have many players around the world. Paulo Bento just needs to open his eyes. Portugal has a list of 170 players playing outside of the country. That was in response to George from the US, who says, forget about all the players and Nani. The national team needs a guy up front who can actually score, and that guy is Lima. Of course, we discussed in the last show the fact that Lima has indicated that he would like to play for Portugal. Brazilian, of course, Brazilian born, but he's been in Portugal for 7 years, I think, 6 or 7 years, and now I think he's about to get Portuguese citizenship. Paulo Bento doesn't seem too keen on the idea. John from the USA says, Bento did get plenty of praise in the Euros with his 4-3-3, working to perfection against the likes of Germany, Holland and Spain. However, if you go back and watch those matches, you'll notice that Bento's tactics were not too dissimilar to the ones used by Carlos Queiroz in South Africa. Interesting point there. John also goes on to talk about why those tactics are actually suited to play against the stronger teams, but not so much against the weaker teams, which is a good point. Val from Canada says, Rick, we are all pulling for the team, but the problems the team has had all along remain. Bento refuses either to change, or even more frightening to us fans, he doesn't have the capacity to change. And Tony from California says, the lack of quality depth and player development comes back to haunt us for these qualifiers. 20 to 30 years. Well, I hope I think that's he must have very strong Portuguese roots. That is real pessimism. And finally, we'll end with a little bit of an optimistic note from Rick in Maine, who says, I am a fan of Bento, and I can see where he's coming from with his selection. I don't blame any leader for going with his guys. Okay, so of course, all of this debate has started, and the players haven't even congregated yet. It's just triggered by Paulo Bento's selection. Simon, what's your opinion about his selection? Has he made the right picks? Should he have picked other people? Has this fierce criticism that's coming his way, is it merited?
I actually, for once, like the picks, and I tweeted that right away that I actually like the picks. There's some new names in there. It's refreshing. Vieirinha, PZ finally got a pick. I think we spoke about him on the last vodcast. He's been doing good in Spain. he got called up. There's obviously we're going to have the couple just dead picks out there, which are kind of useless. Being Sereno, Carlos Martins, like it's kind of a waste. I think they're good picks. I like them. I would have liked to see Victorino Antunes in there. He's had so far for Malaga, he's been really good, and Pashos, he was outstanding. Nani, he's hurt, I believe, so he was left out. I thought that was actually a tactical decision at first, which I was a little surprised about, but he's hurt, so I'm interested to see how Danny's going to be played, if it's going to be Varela or Danny on the wing. Now, everyone always like curious as to why, including myself, is curious as to why Danny is starting on the wing. He's the attacking midfield option that we really have been lacking since Deco left the squad. But overall, I think I actually kind of like the picks. They're pretty good. They're two enormous matches coming up. Portugal has to get that win in Israel. But overall, I actually kind of for once like the picks, and I'm pretty optimistic about this road trip that we have coming up, and I think we're going to get the wins.
Yeah, okay. Well, Simon just mentioned it there, Israel, which really is the crucial match because Portugal, of course, they've dropped points already in this campaign. They lost to Russia, and perhaps even the result, which hopefully won't come back to haunt them, but might. They had that terrible result, only drawing at home to Northern Ireland. And result of those results is that Portugal are lying second on the same number of points as Israel, and that is precisely, like Simon just said, their next opponents. They go to Tel Aviv to play Israel, and really what would be a vital game. If they lose that, it's looking very, very dodgy in terms of qualification. After that, they've got another potentially tricky trip to Azerbaijan. Victor, what's the minimum requirement for Portugal from these two games?
I think either way you look at it, it's got to be 2 victories, and it's got to be 2 convincing victories to get them back into the right set of mind to be able to finish off the rest of the qualifiers with a good record. Really, when you look at it, I think anything but having straight wins throughout the remaining matches would be a little disappointing and would make it difficult for them to qualify. Certainly against Israel, they need the win. They're level with points on Israel right now, so a win over them would put them 3 points ahead, which would be a big boost. And they're 2 games behind Russia. They're 5 points behind, so they need Russia to slip twice. And they need to simply continue to win and win and win and win to have even a chance to get to first. That's probably not going to happen. We're probably looking more at qualifying through second place. But you never know with Portugal. They always tend to slip up when you think that it's a sure win. Northern Ireland would be a good example of that. So really, they just got to go all out and see if they can finish the rest of the qualifying campaign with straight victories. These 2 matches in particular are very important to the possibility of that coming to fruition.
Yeah, that's it's a good point, and of course you're exactly right. Everybody knows this in Portugal that they just have this. And Nani even gave an interview this week, and he actually said this. We tend to make it difficult for ourselves losing against teams or losing points against teams we really shouldn't. Orlando, what is it? What is this about the Portuguese mentality? I think this, in my opinion, this even spreads a little bit to the club sides. They always seem to play up to opposition when they're playing, stellar opposition, some of the strongest sides in the world. We've seen Portugal go toe-to-toe with them, even beat them quite often. And yet they have these terrible results when they, drawing at home to Northern Ireland, drawing to Liechtenstein a few years ago, drawing to Albania, needing a last-minute goal, I think, from Bruno Alves, if memory serves me right. I don't know if that was to win it or to draw, but basically they never seem to be at their top against these weaker sides. What's the explanation for that?
I personally think, we've probably discussed this before. But most of the managers that we've seen at Portugal, end up playing some derivative of a 4-3-3 in every game. Not just, when you're playing the minnows who are parking a bus, they play a 4-3-3 with 3 midfielders that can't shoot from long range. It makes it harder for the one striker to be in the middle with like 8 guys around him and the goalie to try to score a goal. And they're expecting Ronaldo and Nani to score from long range. It's just absurd. It's been going on for years. It's always been the same problem. They don't change formations, ever. If they're playing Liechtenstein, let's run our 4-3-3 against them. If they're playing Germany, let's run our 4-3-3 against them. It's absurd. And that is the main reason why Bentu should be fired. His player selections are lousy, right? It's always the same players. It doesn't matter what's going on in the rest of the world, the Portuguese world. Like the one commenter that you mentioned, he says we have all these players that they could select, and yet we don't select them, right? There isn't enough competition in the squad to answer Tony's response, and me and Tony always get into this. The clubs aren't playing enough Portuguese players that are talented enough already. They're just not getting the playing time. Now some of them are, and you still don't see them in the squad, right? The Sporting B team, some of the Sporting players that have been coming up, some of the Porto B team players, they just don't get the chances that they should. Almeida, Gomes have got chances, but in the end, we're always playing that same formation. It makes it very easy to coach. They're double and triple marking Ronaldo or Nani and keeping everything to the outside, and then we have to score wonder goals to progress. That's the problem. Switch the formations. Play. I realize we don't have a ton of strikers, or at least we don't think we do. But the only reason we don't think we have a ton of strikers is because we've been playing one striker up front for our whole history. It's ridiculous. You have to have some mammoth superstar like LeBron James or Wayne Gretzky to be able to play that position by himself and score a ton of goals. It's ridiculous. But if you put 2 guys like Postiga, who I read on the website was getting a lot of flack, the guy's a super sub. He scores a ton of important goals for Portugal, right? I don't understand why he gets so much flack. Is he a full 90-minute player? Not as a single lone striker. You need to play some of these guys together, right? It would even be pretty cool if you threw a Danny and played a 4-4-2, played a Danny or played a Varela or somebody like that along with them, or someone else. Even Hugo Almeida, who's a big dude, by himself is useless. But if you put him with Postiga, I guarantee you it would create more space for the wingers, we would get more balls in, and we would score more goals. And I think that's the main reason that we don't do well against the minnows. We always have trouble qualifying. But when we get to tournaments, when we're playing against better teams, the 4-3-3 works. And then on top of it, we have such talented players that once their back is put up against the wall, they really come out. They really stand on top of shoulders, and they do what they have to do. And I think going forward to this tournament, Nani's out. And, we all regret that Eder's out because we thought he's the only guy in Portugal that could actually be a single striker. So with them out, our backs are up against the wall. We've been here before. This is, a never-ending story. Our backs are up against the wall, and now they will perform. And we're going to get there.
Okay.
And it has nothing to do with Bentu. If anything, they should fire him before the next World Cup.
Okay.
I hate to cut in quickly.
Yeah,
But
okay,
I'm extremely critical of the Federation. The Federation, I think a lot of the blame lies to where why we have poor form. If you look at our friendly fixtures of late, it's a joke. We're playing joke teams. What do you think is going to happen when you go up against joke teams in friendly games?
Ecuador's top ranked. A lot of people put
Ecuador is good.
down.
What about Gabon in 2012. I'm not trying to insult these teams, but these are not teams that we're going to be facing in the tournament. You look at the other friendlies around, France, Italy, Spain, they're like Germany, they were going against other tough teams. We're not going to get in form when we're not playing good teams. When we're playing friendlies against teams that are going to park the bus, how are we supposed to get in form? No matter what formation we're playing, when other teams are parking the bus, it's almost like we're sending 8-9 guys forward. There really is no formation. It's just everyone get forward because the other team is just sunk back so far, just trying to defend. So, I have a lot of blame for the federation putting us up against these minnows in friendlies, Panama, Gabon. It's like we need better teams to play to get in a groove, to get in form. When we're playing teams that are just parking the bus, how are we supposed to get in form? Like it's such a sloppy game. It's not even a real football because they're just stacking 10 players along the edge of the box. We're just crowding the box. It's not football. It's not how we're going to be playing in the final tournament against teams that are attacking against us and stuff like that. So we need to play good teams to get in form. And these friendlies against minnows are useless. They're getting us nowhere.
Yeah, interesting point, Simon. Well put. And thanks also, Orlando. I enjoyed your metaphor of having our backs against the wall, because of course you quite literally do have your back against the wall, as everyone can see. Okay, we're just going to finish today's show by a quick yay or nay. So thumbs up or thumbs down for 6 questions we have here, based on what we've been talking about this show, more or less. So first of all, looking at the season as a whole, of course it hasn't finished yet, but generally looking at European play this season and the Portuguese sides and how they've performed, would you say that the Portuguese Armada has been successful in European play this season? Yay or nay? Okay, interesting. Yeah, all with a yay there. That is interesting, yeah. I think Benfica and Porto, no doubt, even though Porto got out, going to the last 16 of the Champions League. We all wanted them to go further, but that really shouldn't be sniffed at. Okay, next question. Can Benfica win the Europa League? Okay. Orlando, yes. Simon and Victor, no.
Chelsea and Spurs are good. Chelsea and Spurs are good.
Yeah.
We'll take out Chelsea. We almost took them out when they were better last year.
Okay. Let's see. Let's wait and see. That's definitely one to revisit. Okay, talking along the same lines, and maybe this may give a little indication of the last answers. Will AVB lead Tottenham to the Europa League? Okay, interesting. Yeah, again.
It's more like Gareth Bale leading them to Europa League.
The way they played against Inter, who's a pathetic team, I don't think they're going anywhere.
Although, of course, they were, as Simon just said there, they were without Gareth Bale for that game. But yeah, okay. So next question: do you think Porto's early exit from the Champions League makes them favourites to win the Liga? Very interesting, very interesting. Everyone thinks no, including our 2 resident Porto experts. Okay, of course, I suppose when you lose, especially losing the way that Porto did, although you get the benefit of not having to play so many games, so less tiredness, like Simon mentioned, that's a huge psychological blow. We're going to see how they get over that in the next, possibly tomorrow, when they play against Maritimo. Next question. Do you think Portugal will qualify for the World Cup?
I got my back up against the wall.
Back against the wall, but we'll do it. Yeah, like usual service, I suppose you could say.
We'll meet Bosnia. We'll go through Bosnia again. The road to the World Cup is through Chanica.
Last 2 times, of course, they've qualified for the tournaments by beating Bosnia in the playoffs. Let's see if that happens again. And so, finally, this is a question which I'll be interested to your response to. Do you think Paulo Bento should be fired as national team coach?
Does thumbs down mean no or
no? Thumbs down.
Fired is yes.
Okay.
I think he should stay on.
Let's do this again. Do you think Paulo Bento should stay as Portuguese coach? That way it's easier. Should he stay as Portuguese coach?
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's reversed now.
Thumbs up.
Yeah.
So that would be thumbs up.
Okay. Yep. Okay. I think we get the message. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think I would actually agree with Victor and Simon. Then I think what he achieved in the Euros and also before getting, we can't forget what situation Portugal were in when he took over in qualifying. I think that buys him at least to the end of this qualifying campaign. So hopefully he'll be there and he'll have his chance to perform to a similar level that they did in Ukraine and in Poland. Okay, well that brings our show to the end. Brings us to the end of our show today. Thank you very much for listening or watching. Of course, if you want to keep bang up to date with Portuguese football, just visit the site www.portugal.net, and we'll be back with another podcast in the coming weeks. Bye bye.
Nosso aplauso, nosso carinho.